To get the series off to a splendid start this year, I'd like to welcome David Ferry. David Ferry is the author of No Country I Know, New and Selected Poems and Translations, which was winner of the 2000 Rebecca Johnson Bobbitt National Prize for Poetry and the Academy of American Poets Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize. He is translator of Gilgamesh, the Odes of Horace, the Eclogues of Virgil, the Epistles of Horace, winner of the Landon Translation Prize, and the Georgics of Virgil, all published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Ferry's numerous other awards include the 60th Fellowship of the Academy of American Poets, the Teasdale Prize for Poetry, the John Simon Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship, the Ingram Merrill Award, and the William Arrowsmith Translation Prize from Agni Magazine. In 1998, he was elected a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He is the Sophie Chantal Hart Professor Emeritus of English at Wellesley College and a visiting lecturer in creative writing at Boston University. John Ruskin said that the greatest thing a human soul ever does in this world is to see something and tell what it saw in a plain way. Hundreds of people can talk for one who can think, but thousands can think for one who can see. To see clearly, says Ruskin, is poetry, prophecy, and religion all in one. Today we will be listening to the work of a poet who both sees things clearly and tells what he sees in a plain way. Listen to the first quatrain of Ferry's sonnet, Kythera, which depicts a scene of epic departure. A group of warriors are about to set sail, and yet it is written in language plain. The stanza reads, "There they go, down to the fatal ship. They know how beautiful they are. The ship will sail very soon. The sea will cover them over very soon, unknowingly. The utterance is stately and not showy. No heroic simile disturbs its quiet unfolding. What Ferry says of Virgil's accomplishment in the Eclogues is equally true of his own work, which touches upon the range of things that human beings actually experience, long for, and lose, articulated in strangely beautiful and convincing ways. We're pleased and honored to welcome David Ferry.
If I cough a lot, be very forgiving, okay? I want to start with a poem, and luckily the day turned out to be appropriate for it. The title of the poem is October. The day was hot and entirely breathless, so the remarkably quiet, remarkably steady leaf fall seemed as if it had no cause at all. The ticking sound of falling leaves was like the ticking sound of gentle rainfall as they quietly fell on leaves already fallen, or as they passed them in their falling, now and again it happened that one of them touched one or another leaf still on the tree, still clinging to the idea of being summer, as if the leaves that were falling, but not today, had read and understood the calendar. Giving a reading is a narcissistic experience. The reader comes up and stares at the pool of words on the page and sees how beautiful it is, and everybody else watches. It's a little indecent. And this is a poem called Narcissus. There's the one about the man who went into a telephone booth on the street and called himself up, and nobody answered because he wasn't home. so how could he possibly have answered the phone? The night went on and on and on and on. The telephone rang, and nobody answered. And there's the one about the man who went into the telephone booth and called himself up, and right away he answered. And so they had a good long heart-to-heart far into the night. The sides of the phone booth glittered and shone in the light of the street light as the night went echoing on. Out in the wild hills of suburban New Jersey, up there above South Orange and Maplewood, the surface of a lonely pool iced over under the avid breath of the winter wind, and the snow drifted across it and settled down, so at last you couldn't tell that there was a pond. I'd like to read a longer poem now. It's a poem, I've been working on poems, I've been working for a long, long time on poems by a friend of mine, Arthur Gold, who was a colleague of mine at Wellesley College, and he died a number of years ago. And in his last days, he was writing an extraordinary book of poems, which Frankfurt Art and I got Wellesley College to have printed in an elegant edition. And during those last days, I was writing Arthur a letter about those poems, and since then I've been sort of making poems out of that letter, basically. First, I want to read his poem, this one poem of his, which is called Rome, December 1973. Precious, the winter light in Rome, the year of the fuel crisis. We walked down the middle of the Via Veneto. You, your mother, and your aunt wore black fur coats. Golden, the fluted columns were golden. Visited by that light, that precious light, that also, as I remember, touched the stubble on a priest's face, caught in the black doorway of a church as he was coming out upon us into the cold street, warmed for just a moment by the precious winter light in Rome, the year of the fuel crisis. But at night the darkness seemed total, especially on a bus we took one night towards a destination now forgotten. The darkness outside seemed total. Beyond the yellow balloons, light bulbs, doubly reflected in the window glass, beyond the wan reflected faces, our own, we inferred a darkness so total that even had there been children outside the bus, and even had they reached to touch the windows with their hands, we would have seen nothing. We would not have known they were there. We must have been going somewhere. But all I remember now is the joking tone of the driver and his friend, and the word they offered when we left the bus for the darkness, coraggio. From a letter written to Arthur in those last days, trying to tell him what my experience of these remarkable poems had been for me. For one thing, there's the way the two key phrases, the year of the fuel crisis, precious the winter light, came fully alive with meaning in their recurrence and make the title part of the poem itself, December 1973, and Rome, and the way this repetition gives life to and gets it from the other repetitions in the first stanza. Golden, the fluted columns were golden, and that light, that precious light. Not merely that certain expressions are repeated, but that the whole stanza is saturated with the present need for what the language looks back to, with love and longing. The year of the fuel crisis, The phrase makes fact of the time and realizes where Arthur was and who he was at the time, and therefore what was going to become of him. The phrases counteract the imperial claim that poetry often praises itself by making, the claim to sovereign synchronicity, possessing, gathering into itself both past and present, both here and there, both I as I speak now, and that other one who once spoke with my voice and answered to my name. That light, that precious light, but visited the columns either to make them gold or show how Rome is golden, and the light but touched, and only, as Arthur remembered it, the beard of the priest emerging from the church dark into the street that was made warm but for a moment. And of course, there's the way in stanza 1 that the three women enter into the poem in accurate remembrance: the wife, the mother, the aunt, metonymy for the marriage, its past and future, and they enter into the poem as well as if in rehearsal for the funeral later on. Or maybe in Arthur's mind, writing the poem, the women in their black coats are the fates, just as all others whom we love are fates, with whom we share our darkness journey towards a forgotten destination not yet known. The poem reads the priest in that way too. What ceremony is he returning from? The contrast between the dark of the church and the golden momentary light of the ancient street suggests that he's an arbiter of the dead, come from the place of the dead as if he were a prairie dog or some such creature, come out of a long-forgotten ancient tomb, Mercury, the shepherd of the shades. In the second stanza, the dark is everywhere except for the reflections of the light in the bus. As Arthur's poem says, or are they streetlights seen obscurely and as in fantasy through the windows of the bus? Out there, the golden faces of the children that were not there, the putti children, among them as yet unborn, Anna, his daughter, and his only child, and the bus-light reflections were also golden balloons, as if it was a children's birthday party in a festivity of their ignorance of death. The grammar of this part of the sentence is strange. We inferred a darkness so total that even had there been children outside the bus, and even had they reached to touch the windows with their hands, we would have seen nothing. We would not have known they were there. Strange. And the grammar allows those in the bus to have their vision and not to have it too, as with our every moment of being alive. The children out there who are not there and who would not have been seen had they been there are there, nevertheless. The children we've never had and never will have, and the children we have had who are no longer children, our descendants and our forebears, who do not reach out to touch the windows, trying to touch us, and who do so in the resources of our grammar. Are they reaching out, imploring to be born, or to tell us something they know we know, but that we do not know in the way that in that other dimension, before the event of birth or after the event of death, they know it, though between those two events, they too will be innocent of what it was they knew. The bus driver in Arthur's poem is Charon. As he releases them into the dark, he says, Coraggio, because their journey is towards the forgotten destination, not yet known. I want to read a passage from my it's not a translation, it's a rendering of the Gilgamesh epic. I don't know Babylonian, and I was stood over by a dear friend, William Moran, who was the Syriologist honcho at Harvard at that time, and who got me started reading the word-for-word scholarly translations of this great poem, and then I versified it and made, I hope, a poem out of it. I just want to read one passage from it, and then read a poem that's about a newer poem that's about Bill Moran, and that's about the values of poetry and of scholarship that he exemplified. This is Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, the city-state of Uruk, was so, though the people loved him, he was so arrogantly powerful that the elders asked that the gods create a double to come and keep him in line, and so they made Enkidu, the wild man, who went to the city and wrestled with Gilgamesh, and of course lost, and they became friends and like brothers and maybe lovers, and went off and performed heroic deeds, so heroic that the gods were in committee, were offended, and decided that one of them must die, and they decided that Enkidu must die, and this is the passage in which this happens. In the early hours of the next morning dawning, Enkidu lay in his bed, fear in his belly. He told a dream to Gilgamesh, who was there. I had a dream. There was a noise in the sky and a noise in the earth in answer. On a dark plain, I was alone, but there was one, a man, with a lion head and the paws of a lion too, but the nails were talons, the talons of an eagle. The face was dark. He took hold of me and seized me. I fought with him. I hit at him, but he kept moving about in the dark, too quick for me, and then with a blow he capsized me like a raft. I cried out in the dark to Gilgamesh, two people, companions, but the man overpowered me and raged like a wild bull over me in glory, and Gilgamesh was afraid and did not help me. Then I was changed into something like a bird, with a bird's arms, as spindly as a bird's, and feathered like a bird. He seized an arm and led me to the dwelling of Irkala, the house of darkness, the house of no return. No one comes back, whoever enters there. The garments that they wear are made of feathers. The food they eat is clay. The drink is dirt. Stillness and dust are on the door and doorbolt. There is no light of any sort at all. Dead kings were there, and princes of old kingdoms. Dead high priests and acolytes were there, dead chanters and anointers, bearers of ointments. Etana was there, and Sumukan was there, and on her throne Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, and kneeling before her was Belit Seri, the scribe, who holds the tablet on which the fate of everyone is written. She turned her head and looked at us and said, "Who has led here this latest to arrive?" Gilgamesh said, "The dream is terrible." Enkidu said, "We went together through the dangers of the forest, and we killed the bull of heaven. Do not forget how we, two people together, prevailed against the terror." Enkidu lay suffering on the bed of terror another day, and another day, and another, and the long nights between. And day after day, the suffering of Enkidu grew worse. On the 12th day, he raised up in his bed and spoke these words to Gilgamesh and said, "Gilgamesh, who encouraged me in the battle, saying, 2 people, companions, they can prevail. Gilgamesh is afraid and does not help me. After that, Gilgamesh heard the death rattle. And this is a poem called Brunswick. Brunswick, Maine, early winter 2000, which is the year that Bill Moran died. The poem's in 3 very short sections. That day when Susie drove us out to get the lobsters at the lobster place at the cove, Bill Moran, in the passenger seat of the car, doubled up as if in a fit of laughter. A paroxysm of helpless, silent laughter at the joke the Parkinsons had played on him. The big joke he simply couldn't get over. Bill Moran at breakfast time in the kitchen, bent double in his wheelchair, his chin almost touching the kitchen table, and his eyes intently studying a piece of toast, a just discovered, as yet unreadable Mesopotamian language, not related to Akkadian or Sumerian, much older even than what he knew about already. The great old man with his ferocity of tenderness and joy, his eyes intently studying the text. He sent me once a passage copied from Nietzsche's book, Daybreak. It is a connoisseurship of the word. Philology is that venerable art that asks one thing above all other things: read slowly, slowly. It is a goldsmith's art, looking before and after, cautiously, considering, reconsidering, studying with delicate eyes and fingers. It does not easily get anything done. Bill looking for heaven on the tabletop. After the funeral, Susie said, Bill thought he'd be flying around up there somewhere forever. And he could fly. After breakfast that day, we wheeled him away from the kitchen table and into the living room, and there was a frame contraption set up on long, thin, crane-like legs. It looked like something in a children's playground, with a canvas sling to carry him through the air from the wheelchair to another chair. Heartbreaking, swaddled, small, ridiculously like a newborn baby. Or else the sling resembled those slings you see on television when they rescue people from their sinking boats and carry them up under the angel wings to safety in the helicopter noise. Next, I'd like to read 2 passages from the translation of the Aeneid that I'm working on. How the actuarial gods are holding their sides. I've done books 1 and 2 so far. This is a passage from book 1. It's a translation of lines 464 to 487. And it's the moment when Aeneas, having landed on the coast of Libya and having been taken up to see the city that Dido was so marvelously building, and is well, still invisible because his mother had cast a cloud of invisibility around him. It enters the palace of Dido and excitedly sees inscribed on the walls the story of the fall of Troy, from which he had come, and he sees in that representation an expression of such pity for the fall of that culture, in the sense that he begins to hope that this is a safe place for them to be. He's speaking to Akate, who is his sort of weapons carrier and companion. Akate, look! There's Priam on the wall. Even here, they praise his worth and tell his story. These are the tears of things, for what they are and what become of them. Mortality strikes to the heart. Achates, put away your fears. In the fame recorded here, there is some safety. So saying, his hungry spirit feasts on the pictured unsubstantial scenes as weeping and sighing he gazed, for there he saw the citadel of Pergama and the Greeks in headlong flight from the Trojan youths pursuing them hot on their heels. He saw the panicked Phrygians fleeing from plumed Achilles' chariot, pressing close upon them. He saw the snow-white tents of Rhesus and wept as he saw how bloody Tydides broke in on them, slaughtered them wholesale where he caught them sleeping, and then how he turned his horses home to camp before they had time to forage on Trojan fodder or drink from the waters of Xanthus. He saw how Paris, unhappy boy, having lost his armor in flight, so much outmatched by Achilles, has fallen out, down flat on his back, and dragged along by his horses an empty chariot, still holding the reins, and bumping along the ground by the neck and hair, and his spear reversed, trailing, trundled along, inscribing in the dirt his wretched story. Aeneas saw there too the Trojan women, their hair unbound and streaming, beating their breasts, and with gestures of supplication buried the robe in the temple of the unfriendly goddess Athena, who averted her eyes and would not look at them. He saw Achilles there, after he thrice dragged Hector around the walls of Troy, and now was putting his lifeless body up for sale. Aeneas groaned from the depth of his being when he saw the spoils, the armor and weapons, and the chariot, and the corpse itself of his friend, and Priam stretching out his weaponless hands. And this is from the second book of the Aeneid. It's the passage when the serpents, who were the pets of the goddess Minerva, come across the waters to kill Laocoon. They curl up like house cats at the end of this terrible scene. But then there is an event more frightful still that comes upon us, unprovided, unforeseeing souls. Laocoon, chosen by Lot to be the priest of Neptune, was in the act of performing the sacrifice of a great bull at the altar, when lo, I shudder to speak it, over the tranquil, quiet sea that lay between the island of Tenedos and the mainland, there comes a pair, excuse me, there comes a pair of giant serpents swimming towards us, their immense coils writhing as side by side they make their steady way through the waters and head for shore, their breasts held high, impaling the waves before them, their blood-red crests held high, the rest of their bodies follow along on the surface of the water, their great sinuous backs coiling behind them. We could hear as they came the sound of the foaming water, their bodies displaced. We saw how with blooded, fiery eyes they gaze at the shore. They are approaching, licking their hissing mouths with their quivering tongue. I'm sorry, I've got stuff at the moment. Sorry about that. The blood drained from our faces at the sight as we shrank back. Their whole immensity moves without swerving towards Laocoon. Then first each one of the two enwraps the little body of each of his two sons in its enfolding embrace and pastures upon his limbs. And then, as Laocoon was running armed to try to come to the aid of his dying children, they seize him and bind him in their giant coils, twice coiling around his waist, then twice again, their scaly coils coiling around his throat, their heads and necks held high, victorious. He struggles with his hands to get himself free from the knots they wound around him. His priestly fillets are drenched in bloody gore and their black venom. The clamor of his horrifying cries rises up to the stars like the bellowing of a bull half-killed who has broken away from the altar and from the ill-aimed blow of the ritual axe aimed at its neck. And then the pair of dragons slither away and seek the shrine of fierce Tritonia, that's Minerva, and shelter there beneath the feet of the goddess and her circled shield. I'm sorry, I want to read another translation, very, very different in tone, translation from Horace about Priapus, the garden god with a wooden heart on who protects the garden, and who in this case is a Roman god who knows the value of real estate. And so I have to find it. This is from Horace's, the eighth satire of the first book of satires. There was a time when I was nothing but a useless fig wood log. Some carpenter couldn't make up his mind which I should be, a stool or a Priapus. But finally he decided to make me a god. I am a god, chief scarer off of birds and also thieves. My right hand warns off thieves, and so does this big red obscene pole sticking out of my crotch. As for the mischievous birds, they get scared off by the flapping reed attached to the top of my head. It frightens them all away from the garden I guard. This was the place in the old days where a slave would pay to have some other slave's cadaver thrown out of the little hole in the wall he'd lived in, carried out here on a wooden board and pitched into the common grave where they all end up, like Pantalabas the Scrounger or Nomentanus the Layabout. A stone pillar stood there, saying 1,000 feet across, 300 deep, and Potter's Field. Nobody owns this place. These days, the Esquiline salubrious. It's possible to live there. In the daytime, people walk about on the sunny rampart from which they used to view the grisly sight of whitening bones. As far as I'm concerned, the animals and thieves that always still lurk about the place at night don't cause me half as much trouble as the witches do, who, bent on harassing human souls, come out to gather bones and poisonous herbs as soon as wandering Luna shows her beautiful face. With my own eyes, I've seen the witch Canidius come out at night with the witch Sagana the elder, both of them barefoot, their black skirts pulled up high around their middles, their hair spread out, their faces yellow-green, a hideous sight, the two of them, wailing as they scrabble up the dirt with their long nails and ripping off with their teeth a black lamb's flesh, pouring its blood into the trench they dug to call the Mane up out of their place below to tell the answers to the questions they were asking them to tell. Two images with them, dolls. The woolen doll, the bigger one, standing up over the other, ready to punish the servile waxen doll. The suppliant looking up, expecting to die. One of the witches wailing to Hecate, the other wailing to dread Tisiphone. I've seen the snakes and hell dogs wandering there. I've seen the blushing moon hiding herself behind the tombs to keep from seeing the sight. If this is a lie, let the ravens foul my head with their white droppings, and Pediatia, that queen, and Julius, and Varanus use me as their place to piss and shit on. Let me tell you how, in answer to Sagana, the echoing, doleful, high-pitched voices of the shades of the dead reverberated, and how the witches furtively dug a hole in the ground and buried the beard of a wolf there, and with it a tooth of a spotted female snake, and how the fire blazed up because of the burning waxen doll, and how I, witnessing the words and deeds of those two furies, shuddered and shook with horror. But then, because of the fire the witches built, my heated-up fig-wood buttocks suddenly split with a loud sound like the sound of a bursting bladder, and the witches ran away back into the town. And as they ran, Canidius' false teeth fell out, and Sagana's big witch wig fell off, and all their magic herbs and love chains scattered, and there was mirth and laughter everywhere. I'd like to read a poem called, let's see where I put it. Willoughby Spit. So, when I was a kid, my mother's people came from Virginia, from Norfolk. And Willoughby Spit was a little peninsula. And my aunt lived there, and that's what the poem is about. The little fence around the tiny front yard seemed very little, even to a child. Even as a child, visiting there from the north for a week, or maybe 2 weeks every summer, I experienced the place as if I had been reading in a book that was written for very young children to read. Vivid, crude, charming, frightening, in the way it simplified some truth about the world you didn't know enough to know about. There were a few flowers in the little front yard, ineptly shaped by nature, looking as if someone in a hurry had stuck them in the sand. There were some boards for getting across the sand from the gate to the front porch steps. The boards were burning under your feet with an intensity that took your breath away. It was so hot you could smell the heat of the old gray boards of the little walk and the fence, as if they might burst into smokeless flame at any moment. The sand of the beach across the street was dark. It was a surprise to step on it and find that it was burning dry, although in fact the flat, dull waters of the bay had been known to rise up in rage and smite the shore and get all the way to the road that divided the spit, and even across it, and even across the sand on the other side of the road, almost to reach the smaller bay beyond. The other houses were mostly those of strangers. though of course not all of them were strangers to Aunt Nellie, but hardly any were friends, since she was bound within the spell her eccentricity drew, like a magic circle around her in the sand, so none might enter. In the sands behind the houses there were scrub pines, and living in the woodshed behind Aunt Nellie's house were black widow spiders, so I was told. In the little dark parlor of the house there was an upright piano, table lamps with lampshades with beads along their lower edges. There was a rocker made of some very dark wood, varnished almost black. A couple of other armchairs, high-backed, perhaps of the same wood, but with needlepoint covered seats, and one of them with needlepoint oval insets on the arms. On a table, a newspaper called, I think, The Pilot, telling perhaps the story of how a drunken sailor on the roller coaster that used to tower high above the other attractions at Ocean View Amusement Park nearby, like the skeleton of a dinosaur, had stood up just as the car tipped over the highest point of the highest loop, and how he fell straight down to his death while the car plunged down on its thrilling tracks, entirely unconcerned. Or else it was from a Ferris wheel that he fell, just as the wheel had brought him to the top. And when he stood up, the footboard under his feet seemed to rock back and forward and back and forward, then poured him out over and down, a little figure vividly clear as he fell in the story I heard of a roller coaster or Ferris wheel back then. How long ago? The sailor must have forgotten the manner of his death. On the piano were some pages of sheet music. In the gloaming, oh my darling, when the lights are burning low, and the shadows of the evening softly come and softly go. In the summer heat, the door in from the front porch was always a little bit open, but the light from outside got only a little way in. On another table, a candy dish or ashtray decorated with a woman's head with marcelled golden hair and a Grecian profile expressing some noble outrage or otherwise disturbed emotion, for example, catastrophic loss. There was a curtain, beaded also, I think, between the living room and the dining room that loomed in littleness beyond. There was a huge dining room table and a huge sideboard, the two of them so big you'd have thought the room had to be built around them to get them in, inherited long ago from a larger house or a wedding present with larger expectations. And next to this was the dark bedroom in which Aunt Nellie and her husband, Uncle Frank, slept together in sexless affection, as if in secret collusion. On the bedroom dresser, there was a hairnet, a box containing pins, straight pins and safety, mixed in with jewelry, brooches and earrings, bracelets, and other such things. They glinted in the darkness of the room. In the sand, out back of the house, there were those little black or dark purple pods or pod-like things, some kind of seaweed which on the beach up north in New Jersey I like to pick up and burst between my fingers. But here, because of the spiders, they reminded me of them, and I didn't touch them. Aunt Nellie's picture was in the paper once, triumphantly posing with a large bottle, black widow spiders inside, looking out, as conscious as fireflies of their situation. I'd like to read another translation now, and two poems that are related to it, and almost conclude with that. There's a couple of short ones at the end. This is Virgil's account of the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus, the greatest singer in the world, prototype of poets, and his wife Eurydice, who fled from a man who represents, in a sense, all human occupations, in a sense, who was pursuing her to rape her, and as she fled from him, she was bitten by a snake and died, and was taken to the underworld, and Orpheus, mourning for her, goes down and sings so marvelously to the gods of the underworld and to all the creatures of the underworld that that he is granted the right to bring her back to life, so long as on the journey back he doesn't turn around and look at her, and of course he does, and she's sent back. She fled from you, headlong along the river, unhappy maiden. Did not see the frightful snake that lurked in the high grass, guarding the riverbank. The cries of the sister band of dryads filled the air as high as the mountain tops. The cliffs of Rhodope wept, the cliffs of Pangaea wept, and the warrior land of the Getae, Oreithia, Hebrus. Alone, upon the unfrequented shore, Orpheus, playing his lyre, sang to himself his songs of you, dear wife, as day came on, with the light of the morning sun, and as the light descended in the evening. Singing, he went down through the very throat of Tenerus, the high gate of the dark kingdom of Dis, and through the murky grove where terror dwells in black obscurity, and entered into the Mani's place, the place of the dreadful king, and the hearts no human prayers can cause to pity. And set in motion by the sound of music, from the lowest depths of Erebus there came, as numerous as the many hundred birds that, driven there by the coming on of evening or by a winter storm, fly in for shelter in the foliage of a grove, the flittering shades, the unsubstantial phantom shapes of those for whom there is not any light at all, women and men, famous, great-hearted heroes, the life in their hero bodies now defunct, unmarried boys and girls, sons whom their fathers had had to watch being placed on the funeral pyre, and all around them the hideous, tangling weeds and the black ooze of Kokitos swampy waters. 9 times Styx wound its fettering chain around them, and the house of death was spellbound by his music, all the way down to the bottom of Tartarus. Spellbound the snakes in the hair of the fairies too, of the Furies too, and Cerberus the hell dogs, all 3 mouths were open-mouthed and silent, forgetting to bark. The wind was still, and Ixion's wheel stopped turning. And now, as he was carefully going back, the way he came, and step by step avoiding all possible wrong steps, and step by step Eurydice, whom he was bringing back unseen behind his back, was following. For this is what Proserpina had commanded. They were coming very near the upper air, and a sudden madness seized him, madness of love, a madness to be forgiven, if hell but knew how to forgive. He stopped in his tracks, and then, just as they were just about to emerge out into the light, suddenly, seized by love, bewildered into heedlessness, alas, his purpose overcome, he turned and looked back at Eurydice. And then and there, his labor was spilled and flowed away like water. The implacable tyrant broke the pact. 3 times the pools of Avernus heard the sound of thunder. What was it, she cried? What madness, Orpheus, was it that has destroyed us, you and me? Oh, look, the cruel fates already call me back, and sleep is covering over my swimming eyes. Farewell, I'm being carried off into the vast surrounding dark, and reaching out my strengthless hands to you forevermore, alas, not yours. And saying this, like smoke disintegrating into air, she was dispersed away and vanished from his eyes, and never saw him again. And he was left clutching at shadows, with so much still to say. And the boatman never again would take him across the barrier of the marshy waters of hell. What could he do? His wife twice taken from him. How could he bear it? How could his tears move hell? The Stygian boat has carried her away. I'd like to read a brief poem from an earlier book called Graveyard. It's in 2 stanzas. It's actually a sonnet, unrhymed sonnet. Graveyard. A writing I can't read myself. The picture of my father, taken a couple of years before he died. He was sitting alone someplace, I don't know, maybe one of the meetings he took to going to, trying to keep his place in the world. He's smiling a little, cigarette smoke drifting away. He looks courteous, as always. Not easy to know. The side of a hill. Nothing but a place. Grass, dirt, a few scattered sticks, some stones, the shadow of a tree. Eurydice, my father, speaking the words as they are spoken, the meaning closes itself up. A manuscript written in a language only the dead speak. And then I want to read a newer poem called Resemblance. Resemblance. It was my father in that restaurant on Central Avenue in Orange, New Jersey, where I stopped for lunch and a drink after coming away from visiting. After many years had passed, the place to which I brought my father's ashes and the ashes of my mother, and where my father's grandparents, parents, brothers had been buried, and others of the family all together. The atmosphere was smoky, and there was a vague, struggling transaction going on between the bright daylight of the busy street outside and the somewhat dirty light of the unwashed ceiling globes of the restaurant I was in. He was having lunch. I couldn't see what he was having, but he seemed to be eating, maybe without noticing whatever it was he may have been eating. He seemed to be listening to a conversation with 2 or 3 others. Shades of the dead come back from where they went to when they went away. Or maybe those others weren't speaking at all. Maybe it was a dumb show put on for my benefit. It was the eerie persistence of his not seeming to recognize that I was there, watching him from my table across the room. It was also the sense of his being included in the conversation around him, and yet not, though this in life had been familiar to me. No great change from what had been there before. Even in my sense that I, across the room, was excluded, which went along with my sense of him when he was alive, that often he didn't feel included in the scenes and talk around him, and his isolation itself excluded others. Where were we in that restaurant that day? Had I gone down into the world of the dead? Were those other people really shades of the dead? We expected if they came back, they would come back to impart some knowledge of what it was they had learned. Or if this was indeed down there, then they, down there, would reveal to us who visit them in a purified language some truth that in our condition of being alive we are unable to know. Their tongues are ashes when they'd speak to us. Unable to know is a condition I've lived in all my life. The poverty of imagination about the life of another human being. This is, I think, the case with everyone. Is it because there is a silence that we are, all of us, forbidden to cross? Not only the silence that divides the dead from the living, but antecedent to that, is it the silence there is between the living and the living? Unable to reach across that silence through the baffling light there always is between us. When the living, the body can do so sometimes, but the mind, constricted, inhibited by its ancestral knowledge of final separation, holds back, unable to complete what it wanted to say. What is your name that I can call you by? Virgil said, when Eurydice died again, there was so much still to say that had not been said even before her first death, from which he had vainly attempted with his singing to rescue her. I want to read just one more poem, very shortly. This one is also related to the Orpheus and Eurydice passage, called Lake Water. It is a summer afternoon in October. I am sitting on a wooden bench, looking out at the lake through a tall screen of evergreens, or rather, looking out across the plain of the lake, seeing the light shaking upon the water, as if it were a shimmering of heat. Yesterday, when I sat here, it was the same displaced, out-of-season effect. Seen twice, it seemed a truth was being told. Some of the trees I can see across the lake have begun to change, but it is as if the air had entirely given itself over to summer, with the intention of denying its own proper nature. There is a breeze, perfectly steady and persistent, blowing in towards shore from the other side, or from the world beyond the other side. The mild sound of the little tapping waves the breeze has caused, there's something infantile about it, a baby at the breast. The light is moving and not moving upon the water. The breeze picks up slightly, but still steadily. The increase in the breeze becomes the mild, dominant event, compelling with sweet, oblivious authority alterations in light and shadow, alterations in the light of the sun on the water, which becomes at once denser and more quietly exciting, like a concentration of emotions that had been dispersed and scattered, and now were not. Then there's the mitigation of the shadow of a cloud, and the light subsides a little, as if into itself. Although this is a lake, it is as if a tide were running mildly into shore. The sound of the water, so softly battering against the shore, is decidedly sexual in its liquidity, its regularity, its persistence, its infantile obliviousness. It is as if it had come back to being a beginning, an origination of life. The plane of the water is like a page on which phrases and even sentences are written. But because of the breeze and the turning of the year and the sense that this lake water, as it is being experienced on a particular day, comes from some source somewhere beneath, within itself, or from somewhere else nearby, a spring, a brook, its pure origination somewhere else. It is like an idea for a poem, not yet written, and maybe never to be completed, because the surface of the page is like lake water that takes back what is written on its surface. And all my language about the lake and its emotions, or the sweet obliviousness, or its sweet obliviousness, or even its being like an origination, is all erased with the changing of the breeze, or because of the heedless passing of a cloud. When, moments after she died, I looked into her face, it was as untelling as something natural, a lake, say. The surface of it, unreadable. Its sources of meaning, unfindable anymore. The mouth was open, as if she had something to say. But maybe my saying so is a figure of speech. And I'd like to just conclude with a poem about reading, called In the Reading Room. Alone in the library room, even when others are there in the room, alone, except for themselves, there is the illusion of peace. The air in the room is stilled. There are reading lights on the tables, looking as if they're reading, looking as if they're studying the text and understanding, shedding light on what the words are saying. But under their steady, imbecile gaze, the page is blank, patiently waiting not to be blank. The page is blank until the mind that reads crosses the black river, seeking the queen of the underworld, Persephone, where she sits by the side of the one who brought her there from Enna, Hades the mute, the deaf, king of the dead letter. She is clothed in the beautiful garment of our 1,000 misunderstandings of the sacred text. Thank you.